In the deeply divided town of Elmwood, Marcus Hayes, a black delivery man known for his quiet dignity, finds his life shattered when he's accused of stealing a priceless necklace. The evidence is damning, and the accuser, Officer Aaron Caldwell, is a decorated police officer whose word is taken as gospel. But Caldwell hides a dark secret, one that ties the necklace to his family's buried past and a web of corruption far deeper than anyone could imagine. When Rachel Thompson, a determined journalist seeking redemption for her own family's tragedy, takes an interest in Marcus's case, she uncovers a conspiracy that threatens not just Marcus's freedom, but the fragile balance of the entire town. With the clock ticking and tensions rising, Marcus and Rachel must risk everything to expose the truth. As lies unravel and hidden histories come to light, they'll discover that justice comes at a cost, and sometimes, the fight for it changes you forever. How far would you go to clear your name, confront the past, and fight for a better future? The morning sun spilled through the thin curtains of Marcus Hayes' small apartment. He sat at the worn kitchen table, a cup of black coffee in hand, meticulously reviewing his delivery schedule for the day. His job as a delivery driver wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. He loved the rhythm of it, predictable routes, polite hellos at every doorstep, and a sense of purpose. On the wall above the table hung a photograph of his younger brother, Jamal. Marcus stared at it, his expression softening. Jamal had always been the bold one, the fighter. Marcus's quiet nature had made him feel, at times, like he hadn't done enough to protect his little brother. That thought weighed heavy on him now, but he shook it off and rose to start his day. As Marcus shrugged into his uniform jacket, he muttered to himself, "Let's get this done." The Caldwell estate loomed ahead as Marcus pulled his van up the gravel drive. The sprawling property exuded wealth, with manicured hedges and a fountain at its center. Marcus stepped out, package in hand, and approached the ornate front door. "Morning, Officer Caldwell," Marcus greeted as the door opened to reveal Aaron Caldwell, dressed casually but exuding the same authoritative presence he carried in uniform. "Marcus," Caldwell replied, his tone cordial but clipped. "Right on time." Marcus handed over the package, but as he turned to leave, Caldwell's voice stopped him. "Hold on a second." Turning back, Marcus saw Caldwell step closer, brushing his shoulder against Marcus's delivery bag. "You keep everything secure in there, right?" Caldwell asked, his smile not reaching his cold blue eyes. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied cautiously, instinctively pulling the bag closer. "Good man," Caldwell said, clapping him on the arm. "Have a good one." Marcus nodded and walked back to his van, his steps a little quicker. Something about Caldwell's behavior made his stomach churn, but he dismissed it as nerves. The day had progressed uneventfully until Marcus noticed the flashing blue lights in his rearview mirror. He pulled over to the side of a quiet street, his heart pounding. Caldwell approached the driver's side window, flanked by another officer. "We received a tip about stolen property in one of these delivery vans," Caldwell said, his tone calm but commanding. "Stolen property? In my van?" Marcus repeated, incredulous. Caldwell nodded. "Mind if we take a look?" Marcus hesitated. "I don't think I have a choice, do I?" "Not really," Caldwell said with a smirk. As the officers searched the van, Marcus stood by helplessly. Caldwell reached into Marcus's delivery bag and pulled out a velvet-lined jewelry box. Opening it, he revealed an ornate diamond necklace. "This is it," Caldwell declared. "Marcus Hayes, you're under arrest for possession of stolen property." Marcus's world tilted. "What? No. I've never seen that before in my life." Caldwell ignored him, pulling out handcuffs. "Tell it to the judge." The cell was small and dimly lit, the walls scuffed with years of neglect. Marcus sat on the narrow bench, replaying the day's events in his mind. A public defender entered, a middle-aged man with tired eyes and a thick stack of papers. "Mr. Hayes, I'm your court-appointed attorney," he began without preamble. "The evidence against you is strong. They found the necklace in your van." "I didn't steal anything," Marcus insisted, his voice firm but weary. Look, the attorney said, his tone patient but patronizing, pleading guilty might get you a lighter sentence. If you fight this. I'm not pleading guilty, Marcus interrupted. I didn't do it. The defender sighed. It's your choice, but you need to understand the odds aren't in your favor. After the lawyer left, Marcus leaned back against the cold wall, thinking of Jamal. I'm not giving up, he muttered to himself. Rachel Thompson sat cross-legged on her cluttered couch, her laptop balanced precariously on her knees. She was scrolling through the local news when a headline caught her eye, delivery driver arrested in connection to stolen necklace. She clicked on the article, her eyes scanning the details. Marcus Hayes. A black man accused of theft by none other than Officer Aaron Caldwell. Something about it felt disturbingly familiar, pulling her back to her father's last case. She reached for her father's old journal, flipping through its worn pages until she found the entry, "The system is stacked against men like him." It's not about guilt or innocence, it's about control. Rachel set her jaw. Not this time, she said under her breath. Grabbing her phone, she dialed a contact at the police station. Hey, it's Rachel Thompson. Can you tell me about this Marcus Hayes case? As she listened, her resolve hardened. This wasn't just a story, it was personal. The Elmwood courthouse was both imposing and crumbling, a physical reflection of its role in the town. Marcus stood at the defendant's table, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. The public defender beside him droned on about Marcus's unblemished work history and lack of criminal record, but Marcus could feel the disinterest in the room. Across the courtroom, Officer Aaron Caldwell sat confidently, his uniform perfectly pressed, his expression one of smug authority. The judge, an older man with a permanent scowl, adjusted his glasses. Officer Caldwell, you testified that you found the stolen necklace in Mr. Hayes' possession? Yes, Your Honor, Caldwell said smoothly. It was concealed in his delivery bag. The whispers in the gallery grew louder. Marcus turned to face the judge, his voice steady but firm. I didn't do it. That necklace wasn't in my bag when I started my route. The judge cut him off with a glare. This isn't the time for your defense, Mr. Hayes. Moments later, the judge announced his decision, bail denied. Marcus's stomach sank as the gavel hit the bench. Rachel's sneakers crunched against the gravel as she approached the courier depot where Marcus worked. The building was a hive of activity, delivery drivers rushing in and out with packages. Excuse me, she said to a young driver sitting on a break. Do you work with Marcus Hayes? The man hesitated, glancing around nervously. Yeah, I do. Why? I'm a journalist, Rachel said, offering a small smile. I'm trying to figure out what happened. The driver shifted uncomfortably. Look, Marcus is a good guy. Keeps to himself, works hard. But what? Rachel pressed. The man lowered his voice. The morning he got arrested, I saw Caldwell near his van. Didn't think anything of it at the time. Rachel's heart quickened. You're saying Caldwell might have been near Marcus's van before the arrest? I'm not saying anything, he muttered, standing abruptly. I've got deliveries to make. Rachel jotted down the interaction in her notebook, her determination growing. The Caldwell estate felt suffocatingly still as Evelyn Caldwell sat in her private sitting room, thumbing through an old photo album. Her eyes lingered on a faded picture of her late husband with a little girl on his lap, a girl Evelyn knew was not hers. The necklace gleamed in the photo, draped around the girl's neck. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. The sound of the door creaking open startled her. Mother? Aaron Caldwell stood in the doorway, his face hard. What are you doing? Evelyn closed the album hurriedly. Just looking through memories. He stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. You're not thinking of getting involved, are you? Her voice wavered. Aaron, this isn't right. That young man. Enough, he snapped, his tone icy. Stay out of it. As he left, Evelyn pressed her trembling hands to her face. The jail was loud with the echoes of clanging metal and the murmurs of men with nowhere to go. Marcus sat silently on his bunk, but his stillness was noticed. "You're the delivery guy, right?" asked an older inmate across from him. Marcus nodded. "Yeah." "Caldwell got you?" "Yeah," Marcus said again, bitterness creeping into his voice. The older man leaned closer. "He doesn't lose, you know. He's got this town in his pocket." Marcus clenched his fists. "Doesn't mean I'll give up." The man smiled faintly. "That's what they all say at first. Question is, how far are you willing to go to prove it?" Marcus didn't answer, but the question lingered long after the man walked away. Rachel pushed open the door to the Elmwood police station, her heels clicking on the scuffed tile floor. Caldwell was at the front desk, talking to another officer. "Officer Caldwell," she said, her voice sharp. He turned slowly, his expression neutral. "Miss Thompson, isn't it? To what do I owe the pleasure?" "I have a few questions about Marcus Hayes," she said, crossing her arms. Caldwell raised an eyebrow. "It's an open-ended case. Not much to discuss." Rachel stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Then why was your car seen near his van before the arrest?" His smile didn't falter, but his eyes darkened. "Careful, Miss Thompson. Accusations like that can get you in trouble." Rachel didn't flinch. "So can framing an innocent man." Caldwell leaned in, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Watch yourself. This town doesn't take kindly to outsiders stirring up trouble." Rachel met his gaze, her heart pounding. "I'm not going anywhere." As she walked out, she felt the weight of his glare on her back. The dull hum of fluorescent lights filled the jail's visiting room. Marcus sat at a metal table, his hands cuffed in front of him. He didn't look up when Rachel entered, her bag slung over her shoulder and her notepad in hand. "Mr. Hayes?" Rachel's voice was calm but carried an edge of urgency. Marcus raised his eyes, meeting hers. "Who are you?" "I'm Rachel Thompson," she said, sitting across from him. "I'm a journalist. I'm investigating your case." Marcus leaned back slightly, suspicion flickering across his face. "Why? What's in it for you?" Rachel hesitated, then said, "My father was a civil rights lawyer. He died defending someone in a case like yours. I couldn't do anything then, but I can now." Marcus studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "So, what do you want to know?" "Everything. Start with Caldwell. Has he ever harassed you before?" Marcus shook his head. "No. I kept my head down. Never gave him a reason." Rachel scribbled notes. "What about the necklace? Did you see it before the arrest?" "Never," Marcus said firmly. "It wasn't in my bag when I left the depot. I swear." Rachel looked up, meeting his determined gaze. "I believe you, Marcus. And I'm going to prove it." For the first time in days, Marcus felt a flicker of hope. Aaron Caldwell's boots echoed against the concrete floor of an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. 3 men waited for him inside, their expressions wary. "Caldwell," one of them said, crossing his arms. "This heat you're bringing down, it's bad for business." "I don't pay you to worry about the heat," Caldwell snapped. "You just make sure the rest of the goods are moved before anyone finds them." One of the men stepped closer. "And the necklace?" "That was supposed to stay buried with the rest." Caldwell's jaw tightened. "It's taken care of. Hayes is the perfect scapegoat." "You better hope so," the man said, his tone a warning. "If this blows back on us, you're on your own." Caldwell turned and walked out, his confidence masking a flicker of unease. The Elmwood library was quiet, the scent of old paper lingering in the air. Rachel sat at a dusty desk, her laptop open and a pile of yellowed newspapers beside her. She flipped through the pages, searching for Caldwell's name. Her breath caught when she found it, local police officer tied to family scandal. The article detailed an estranged half-sister Caldwell's father had disowned years ago. Rachel's pulse quickened as she scanned the piece. A photograph accompanied the article, Caldwell's father with a young black girl wearing a diamond necklace. Rachel grabbed her phone and snapped a picture of the article. "This is it," she whispered to herself. "This ties it all together." The jail yard was noisy with the sounds of inmates talking and laughing, but Marcus sat alone on a bench, staring at the cracked pavement. A man approached him, a burly inmate with a mocking grin. "You're the guy who got nailed by Caldwell, huh?" Marcus didn't respond. "You think you're better than us? Think you're innocent?" the man taunted, stepping closer. Marcus stood slowly, his eyes steady. "I know I'm innocent," he said firmly. The inmate smirked. "Takes guts to say that in here. Too bad it won't help you out there." Marcus held his ground, refusing to back down. The man chuckled and walked away, but Marcus's quiet defiance hadn't gone unnoticed by the others. The cafe was nearly empty when Evelyn Caldwell walked in, her gloved hands clutching her purse tightly. Rachel stood to greet her, offering a polite smile. "Mrs. Caldwell, thank you for meeting me," Rachel said, motioning for her to sit. "I don't have much time," Evelyn said, her voice trembling. Rachel nodded. "I understand. I just need to ask you about your son. About the necklace." Evelyn hesitated, her eyes darting to the door. "I don't know anything about it," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Rachel leaned forward. "I think you do. I found an article about your husband's other child. The one he disowned." Evelyn froze. Rachel pressed on. "The necklace belonged to her, didn't it?" Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes. "I don't know what you expect me to do," she whispered. "Tell the truth," Rachel said gently. "It's the only way to stop this." Evelyn rose abruptly. "I need time to think." As she left, Rachel watched her go, hoping Evelyn's guilt would be stronger than her fear. Marcus Hayes sat across the scratched plexiglass barrier from Rachel Thompson. The grimy surfaces reflected the hopelessness that clung to the room. Marcus shifted in his seat, his broad shoulders hunched with discomfort. "Marcus," Rachel started, her green eyes resolute, "I'm here because I believe you. But I need to know everything about that day at the Caldwell estate." Marcus's dark eyes met hers, a flicker of suspicion crossing his face. "What makes you different from the rest?" he asked, his voice calm but tinged with disbelief. "They already judged me guilty the moment Aaron Caldwell put those cuffs on me." Rachel leaned closer to the glass. "I'm different because I know how this town works. My father," she faltered, gathering her thoughts. "My father fought for people like you, and he lost his life because of it." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Marcus nodded. "All right, Miss Thompson. Let's talk." Rachel pulled out her notebook, ready to uncover the truth one step at a time. The warehouse smelled of damp concrete and gasoline. Officer Aaron Caldwell's polished boots echoed as he stepped inside, greeted by a smirking man in a leather jacket. Jack Foley, a local gang leader, lounged against a rusted table. "Aaron, you look tense," Jack drawled. "What, trouble in paradise?" "The girl," Caldwell snapped. "The journalist. She's asking too many questions, poking around where she shouldn't." Jack's smirk widened. "And you're worried she might connect the dots between you, me, and our little enterprise? She's dangerous. If she finds anything, we're both going down," Caldwell growled. "Handle her." Jack's expression darkened. "You might want to remember who's handling whom. But don't worry, Caldwell, I'll keep your little secret safe. For now." The tension between them was thick as Caldwell stormed out. Outside, he clenched his fists, determined to keep control no matter the cost. Rachel flipped through yellowed newspaper clippings, her fingers smudged with ink. Her instincts had led her here, to the dusty archives where the town's secrets lay forgotten. "Got you," she whispered, pulling out a faded photo. It showed Evelyn Caldwell's sister, a strikingly beautiful woman wearing the diamond necklace in question. Her name, Clarice, was scrawled on the back along with a date from decades ago. Who was she? Rachel murmured, feeling the weight of history pressing on her. She snapped photos of the clipping with her phone, determined to connect this discovery to Marcus's case. Marcus sat on a concrete bench, his gaze fixed on the chain-link fence enclosing the yard. Nearby, another inmate, a wiry man with a sharp wit named Tompkins, sidled over. "You gotta stop looking like a kicked dog, Hayes," Tompkins said, plopping down next to him. "Caldwell's banking on you staying quiet." Marcus glanced at him, his lips pressed into a thin line. "What good's talking?" "Sometimes it's all you got," Tompkins said with a shrug. "Rumor is that reporter chick's digging up some real dirt. Might be time you give her something to work with." Marcus stared at the fence for a long moment, then nodded. "Maybe you're right. It's time they hear my side." Rachel returned home late, her desk overflowing with notes and photographs. She reviewed her findings, the photo of Clarice, Evelyn Caldwell's cryptic warnings, and Marcus's steadfast claims of innocence. It was all connected, but how? Her phone buzzed. It was a text from an anonymous number: "Stop now or suffer the consequences." Rachel froze, the threat sending a chill down her spine. She glanced toward her locked door, suddenly feeling the weight of her solitude. After a moment, she steadied herself. "Not today, Caldwell," she muttered, flipping open her laptop to start drafting the story that could crack this case wide open. Officer Aaron Caldwell leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking under his weight. He stared at the grainy surveillance photo of Rachel entering the library archives earlier that day. "She's sniffing too close," Caldwell muttered, tossing the photo onto his desk. Across from him, Deputy Grayson stood at stiff attention. "She's digging up ghosts, Caldwell," Grayson offered cautiously. "You sure there's a need to escalate?" Caldwell's eyes snapped to him. "There's always a need to cut off the loose threads, Grayson. We can't let her pull this whole thing apart." With a curt gesture, Caldwell dismissed him. As Grayson left, Caldwell picked up his phone, dialing a number he reserved for special cases. "Jack Foley? We've got a problem." Marcus watched through the thick glass as Rachel entered, her determined pace a contrast to her petite frame. She placed a recorder on the table before picking up the handset. "You ready to do this?" she asked, cutting straight to the point. Marcus hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah. I've stayed quiet for too long. It's time people hear what Caldwell's really about." As Marcus spoke, his voice steady and calm, Rachel jotted down notes and asked probing questions. For the first time since his arrest, Marcus felt seen, his truth no longer trapped behind the walls of his silence. Evelyn Caldwell sat at her desk, the photo of her disowned stepdaughter, Clarice, clutched tightly in her hands. Her normally serene expression was creased with turmoil. "Mother," Aaron's voice startled her. She turned to see him standing in the doorway, his blue eyes scanning the room. "What are you doing?" Evelyn stiffened. "Aaron, this necklace, this case. You're pushing things too far." Aaron stepped closer, his presence suddenly menacing. "I'm protecting this family's legacy." "That's more than you ever did." "Keep out of it, Mother." His words cut deep, but Evelyn's resolve strengthened. As he left, she hid the photograph deeper in her desk, knowing the time would come to make a choice that could fracture their already fragile relationship. Rachel's laptop pinged with a new email from an anonymous address. "Caldwell's been working with Foley to cover up bigger crimes," the message read, accompanied by an attachment of scanned police reports that had conveniently vanished from public records. She read through the documents, her heart racing. Caldwell's connection to the gang leader Foley wasn't just hearsay, this was the evidence she needed. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a call from Marcus. "You need to be careful, Rachel," he warned. "Caldwell won't stop at threats." "I'm not afraid of him," Rachel replied, determination edging her voice. "I'm going to publish the truth." The next morning, Rachel approached the courthouse where a hearing for Marcus's case was set to take place. Her bag carried the evidence she planned to present to Marcus's defense lawyer. Before she could reach the entrance, two men stepped into her path. They were large, their leather jackets bearing faint scuffs that spoke of violence. "Miss Thompson," one of them said, his voice rough. "A word?" Rachel backed up instinctively. "If this is Caldwell's way of intimidating me, it won't work." The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Lady, we're not here for a chat. Walk away from this, or it's the last story you'll ever write." As they turned and left, Rachel clutched her bag tighter. Fear rose in her chest, but she tamped it down, resolved to face whatever came next. Under the cover of twilight, Evelyn sat stiffly on a bench, her silver-streaked hair reflecting the dim light. Rachel approached cautiously, glancing around for any sign of Caldwell's men. "You were right about Clarice," Evelyn admitted as Rachel sat down. "She was my husband's daughter from an affair. The necklace belonged to her." Rachel's jaw tightened. "Why now? Why tell me?" Evelyn looked away, her voice shaking. "Because Aaron is losing himself. If this continues, he'll destroy everyone, including himself." She handed Rachel the photograph and a bundle of old letters, the proof Rachel needed. "Do what you must," Evelyn whispered. Rachel watched as Evelyn left the park, her figure swallowed by the night. The weight of truth pressed heavier than ever on Rachel's shoulders. Rachel Thompson stepped into the dimly lit station, her file folder clutched tightly in her hands. Sheriff Harlan, a man in his 50s with graying hair and weary eyes, looked up from his desk as she entered. "Miss Thompson," he greeted cautiously. "What can I do for you?" Rachel dropped the folder on his desk, the pages spilling open to reveal incriminating evidence. "You can start by telling me why Aaron Caldwell's crimes are going unchecked." Harlan frowned, leaning forward to glance at the documents. "You're accusing a decorated officer of corruption based on stolen reports and conjecture?" "No," Rachel countered. "I'm accusing him based on facts. Stolen evidence. False arrests. His ties to Jack Foley and an illegal trafficking operation." Harlan's jaw tightened. "This is dangerous territory, Miss Thompson. Caldwell, he has the town behind him." "Not if I publish this," Rachel shot back. "You want to protect Elmwood? Start by doing your job." After a long moment, Harlan nodded grimly. "I'll look into it. But don't expect miracles." Evelyn Caldwell sat in the confessional booth, her hands trembling as she clutched the photograph of Clarice. On the other side of the screen, Father Jennings listened in silence. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned," Evelyn began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've lied. I've hidden truths that could destroy my family. But if I don't, innocent lives will continue to suffer." Father Jennings's voice was calm. "The truth can be painful, Mrs. Caldwell. But silence can be far more destructive." Tears welled up in Evelyn's eyes. "I've already lost one child to hatred. I can't lose another." "Then speak," the priest urged gently. "Let the light heal what darkness has broken." Evelyn left the church with a newfound resolve. She needed to talk to Rachel. Rachel sifted through her notes late into the evening. The knock on her door startled her. She approached cautiously, peering through the peephole. Two men stood outside, their faces shadowed. "Who is it?" she called. "Delivery," one of them replied gruffly. Rachel's instincts screamed at her to run, but before she could react, the door burst open. The men shoved her back, scattering her files across the floor. "This is your last warning," the taller one growled, looming over her. "Drop the story, or you won't be so lucky next time." They left as abruptly as they'd entered. Shaken but defiant, Rachel scrambled to collect her notes. She grabbed her phone, dialing Marcus. "They know what we have," she said urgently. "We need to move fast." Marcus was surprised to see a new face on the other side of the glass. Frank Mason, a former officer who had been jailed for blowing the whistle on departmental corruption, nodded in greeting. "I've been hearing things about Caldwell," Mason said. "Sounds like you and that reporter of yours are getting close to something big." "We are," Marcus replied warily. "Why do you care?" Mason leaned forward. Because Caldwell's the reason I'm in here. I have records, dates, times, the whole operation. You can use them to bring him down. Marcus's heart raced. Why now? Because someone needs to end this, Mason said firmly. And you might just be the one to do it. Under the cover of twilight, Rachel and Evelyn met by the park bench. Evelyn handed over the photograph and a bundle of old letters. This is everything, Evelyn said, her voice trembling. Letters from Clarice, proof of her existence, and the truth about the necklace. Rachel studied the documents, her respect for Evelyn growing. You're doing the right thing. Evelyn's gaze fell. Right or not, it'll destroy my son. He's already destroyed himself, Rachel replied softly. But you might save Marcus. Evelyn nodded and stood. Promise me you'll use this wisely. I will, Rachel vowed, clutching the evidence. The courtroom buzzed with tense energy as Marcus Hayes was led to the defense table. He glanced back at Rachel, who sat in the gallery, her hands clutching a leather notebook. The stakes were higher than ever. Judge Wallace, a stern figure with a deep furrowed brow, banged his gavel. Order in the court. Counsel, you may proceed with opening statements. The prosecution painted Marcus as a trusted employee who had betrayed the Caldwell family's trust, emphasizing the undeniable evidence, the necklace found in his van. When it was the defense's turn, Marcus's new lawyer, Simone Pierce, stepped forward. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, she began, this is a case about power, deception, and injustice. And by the end of this trial, you will see who really belongs in that chair. Marcus straightened in his seat, bolstered by her confidence. Rachel adjusted the microphone before facing the jury. Her green eyes were steady as Simone guided her through the questioning. Miss Thompson, can you tell us about the evidence you uncovered regarding Officer Caldwell? Simone asked. Rachel detailed her findings, the storage unit filled with stolen goods, the forged police reports, and the connection between Caldwell and Jack Foley's criminal network. The jury hung on her every word. The prosecutor tried to rattle her. Miss Thompson, isn't it true you're motivated by a personal vendetta, given your father's past? Rachel's gaze didn't waver. My father taught me to fight for justice, not revenge. That's exactly what I'm doing. The courtroom murmured, and Judge Wallace called for order. The room fell silent as Evelyn Caldwell took the stand. Her composed demeanor betrayed the turmoil inside her. She avoided Aaron's gaze as Simone approached. Mrs. Caldwell, can you tell the court about this necklace? Simone asked, holding up the evidence bag containing the diamond jewelry. Evelyn's voice wavered. It belonged to my stepdaughter, Clarice. She was my husband's child from an affair. The family disowned her, but she left this behind when she passed. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Evelyn continued, Aaron took the necklace. He planted it on Mr. Hayes to cover up his involvement in a smuggling operation. I've hidden the truth for too long. Aaron Caldwell shot to his feet. You don't know what you're talking about, he yelled. Judge Wallace pounded the gavel. One more outburst, Officer Caldwell, and you'll be held in contempt. Simone called her next witness, Frank Mason. The former officer detailed Caldwell's corruption, corroborating Rachel's evidence with dates, transactions, and personal accounts. Caldwell used his badge as a shield to profit from crime, Mason declared. And when Marcus got too close to one of their operations, he became the perfect scapegoat. The prosecutor's cross-examination fell flat, unable to discredit the mountain of evidence. Caldwell's once imposing figure now seemed diminished. The jury deliberated for hours. The tension in the courtroom was palpable when they finally returned. Has the jury reached a verdict? Judge Wallace asked. The foreperson stood. We have, Your Honor. On the charge of grand larceny, we find the defendant, Marcus Hayes, not guilty. Cheers erupted from the gallery, tears streaming down Marcus's face as he embraced Simone. Rachel squeezed his shoulder, her smile triumphant. Aaron Caldwell was arrested on the spot, his face a mask of shock and fury. Marcus stepped into the sunlight, the weight of the ordeal finally lifting. A small crowd of supporters cheered, some holding signs that read, "Justice for Marcus." Rachel joined him, her notebook tucked under her arm. "How does it feel to be free?" she asked. Marcus looked at her, his deep brown eyes filled with gratitude. "Like it's only the beginning." Rachel nodded. "Let's make it count." They stood together, two individuals united by their fight for truth, ready to face whatever came next. The faint glow of dawn peeked through Rachel Thompson's curtains as she typed furiously at her desk. Empty coffee cups littered the surface, and a collection of documents and photographs lay scattered around her laptop. Her fingers paused as she reread the headline, "Justice Prevails in Elmwood, the Truth Behind the Necklace Scandal." Rachel leaned back, her eyes misting with emotion. She thought of her father, his unfinished fight for justice, and how Marcus's story had given her a chance to continue that legacy. With a determined click, she hit publish. The story went live. "For you, Dad," she whispered, closing her laptop. Marcus Hayes opened his door to the excited chatter of his niece and nephew. Their small arms wrapped around his waist as they yelled, "Uncle Marcus, you're back." His sister, Tanya, stood in the doorway, her eyes glistening with tears. "It's been a long time coming, Marcus." He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "It's over now, Tanya. I'm free." They settled on the couch, the family catching up on the time they had lost. Marcus glanced at the framed photo of his younger brother on the wall and silently vowed to honor his memory by standing tall from now on. Evelyn Caldwell stood on the platform, a modest suitcase at her feet. The autumn breeze ruffled her silver-streaked hair as she gazed at the tracks ahead. Rachel approached, her notebook in hand. "Mrs. Caldwell," she began gently. "Where will you go?" Evelyn turned to her, a sad smile on her face. "Someplace far from here. I can't fix the past, Miss Thompson, but I can try to find peace." Rachel hesitated, then extended a hand. "Thank you for everything. Your courage made the difference." Evelyn shook her hand firmly. "Take care of yourself, Rachel. And keep fighting for the truth." The train pulled into the station, and Evelyn stepped aboard, leaving behind the town and the burdens of her family's legacy. Aaron Caldwell sat on the edge of his bunk, staring at the cold gray walls of his cell. The sound of the metal door sliding open broke his trance. A guard entered with a smirk. "Enjoying your new digs, Caldwell?" he asked sarcastically before sliding a tray of food onto the bed. Caldwell glared but said nothing. The betrayal by his mother, the damning evidence presented in court, it all replayed in his mind, a cacophony of regrets and rage. He muttered to himself, "They'll pay for this, one day." The guard chuckled as he exited. Caldwell's fall from grace was complete, but his refusal to reflect on his actions showed that redemption might never come. Marcus and Rachel stood near the old fountain at the heart of Elmwood, the place where their fight for justice had truly begun. The afternoon sun bathed the square in golden light as they shared a quiet moment. "Thank you, Rachel," Marcus said, his deep brown eyes filled with sincerity. "For believing in me when no one else did." Rachel smiled. "You didn't just clear your name, Marcus. You've inspired a lot of people in this town, including me." Marcus nodded, a small smile forming. "So, what's next for you?" She gestured toward her notebook. "More stories. More fights for truth. But first, I think I'll stay here a while. Elmwood's still got a lot of work to do." "This town's lucky to have you," Marcus said warmly. They parted ways, both looking forward to the future with renewed purpose and determination.